he has to be Brock Purdy in terms of like pro style running the offense. Can he keep his confidence and be extremely accurate and decisive? And can he throw into windows that are going to be tight? Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports.
Today, we're going to do a holistic breakdown of the Iowa football program. So we have obviously all the data points from the 2024 season with the new OC and Tim Lester. We got to see a new scheme breakout. We got to see that develop and progress and see, the running QB get mixed in and all the obvious variations he had from what we've seen from the previous administration. We also saw the Iowa defense, come back down from earth where we had, really successful seasons in the past. And now they actually became sort of a weak point at points in the season. And also just cover our whole feeling of where the program sits within this new Big Ten and where we see it going in the future.
Yeah, it was just a really interesting 2024 season. I think it's always fun to think about if you found out things that happened during the 2024 season in the preseason. So it's like Caleb Johnson is going to be, damn near a Heisman contender. He's going to break the single touchdown rushing touchdown record over Sean Green. Caleb Brown's not going to have a meaningful snap the entire season. You're going to lose to Iowa State in week 2. You're going to beat Wisconsin by 40 by running the ball for 280 yards or whatever it was.
300.
Was it 300? Yeah. So you have all these weird data points that are all would help frame you thinking you were either 10-2, 11-1 playoff contender when Caleb Johnson's having this massive year, and really the revitalization of our run game over the last decade. We haven't had a run game that's been sustainable and consistent.
Explosive, and then also just different from the rest of the Big Ten. Usually we sat middle of the pack, and occasionally, at least from a yards per carry perspective, we were on the lower half and end.
Yeah, and so that was probably your number one thing you circle with the amount of returning starters you had in the old line and Caleb Johnson and not knowing where the running back room was beforehand. And obviously, anyone that watched Caleb as a freshman, sophomore saw this year coming, but it all of a sudden got really quiet down his second end of his sophomore year. Is he going to do it or not? But then the defense that you would expect to pair with that run game has 400 yards plus it given up against UCLA and Michigan State. Teams that are in your mid-tier, upper mid-tier programs, at the time were actually 3-3 and, maybe a 3-5 team, maybe a 3-4 team in UCLA. And that just shakes the foundation of what you thought you had established. So it was a year where you can see Iowa progressing on offense and taking a step back on defense, and you kind of sit in the exact same spot you came into, maybe with a little less confidence going into the next year. And I think that's a really important year for 2025 now for Iowa, given that state of can we step back up and feel like we're a top, 5 defense, top 10 defense. And we actually were this year. You think of points per game and yards per game and efficiency-wise. We did have a strong defense, but given how strong it was in previous years, it did feel like a big step back. So it's going to be a big year in 2025. I think we can break into the portal acquisitions, which is kind of the biggest aspect of confidence and, definitely the talking point of this episode.
Yeah, so when we previewed the 2024 defense, I think we took Graves and Black as 2 of the top 3 defenders going into the season. We looked at D tackle as actually, potentially the strongest position on the team. We did note that there was going to be depth concerns, but we didn't really play that out, through a whole season as being a concern that was going to, limit this team. And it really did. We came into how it played out is you've essentially had 2.5 D tackles. And that's not been the case for Iowa football for, I think going back 4 or 5 years, you've been usually playing at least 4 guys there.
Mm-hmm.
I think in 2023, you had 3, but there are 3 really strong guys with Logan Lee, Graves, and Black that you played a ton, and they all could rotate and, share reps.
Play multiple positions too.
But with Pittman, we hardly played him any relevant snaps, maybe played a quarter of the game. And I think what that really took a toll on was Graves and Black's ability to exert maximum energy on critical plays early in games. And we saw them have really slow starts, through Michigan State, through UCLA. When they would get to big moments late in the game, they would show up and they'd stymie the double team at the point of attack. You'd have Graves making plays in the passing game. But how Iowa football likes to play is through that 4-man front. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but if we're going to line at 5 to 6 yards off the ball for every single player outside of this group, how well they can, not be moved, especially at that point of attack double team. That's probably the most critical piece of Iowa football is if you can limit that action to maybe a 1 to 2 yard push, at worst case, a 3 yard push, and then allow the back end to move in and be the heavy bodies that they are and well tackling bodies, all the scheme fits together very well.
Mhm.
When that guy is being moved or that D-line is not making the plays they need to in that initial 1 to 2 seconds of a play, then you really see the scheme become the catching defense that it is, where we're just going to be backing up. And that's what we saw almost every single game this year against any offense with a pulse, is that between the 20s was just a free-for-all possession thing.
Yeah.
And I think what you're going to probably go into next is that then DN play as well. We didn't expect a really high-end level DN play, but what we got from Craig this year was just not what you needed from a fifth-year senior.
Yeah, I don't think he was in all conference in any
Yeah.
dimension, and it's similar to like a John Wagner type of career where this guy comes in as a 4-star, plays snaps. 2021, I can still remember a sack he had against Penn State. Like, was seeing the field at an early age, and you expect when a guy plays that early with that pedigree, when he gets to his senior year, he's going to be a Chauncey Golston, he's going to be an Anthony Nelson,
Van Valkenburg.
where these guys are second team All Big Ten, double-digit sacks, possibly maybe 8. And then, like, going to be, without a doubt, UDFA draft pick, which I think still Craig is going to find his way onto a roster, at least to try out for a 53-man roster. But just, unfortunately, just didn't get to that point. Don't know if it was injuries, don't know what the circumstances was. But when you lack D-tackle depth and then one of your DNs that you kind of invested a long time into doesn't take that leap they expected, the scheme does fall apart quickly. And I think going into the transfers now, adding the depth of Hawthorne and Pace, it can really set this defense up to be what it was in previous years because of that depth. And watching Hawthorne, first off, I don't know how we let this guy get out of the Midwest to South Dakota State. Obviously, he was a 6'3", 245 2-star. But I guarantee you Iowa kind of had some eyes if you watched his senior film. He only has like 170 views, so it might have been like an under-radar kid completely. But he has that explosiveness. I think he, a recruit that kind of flamed out, but almost a identical type of prospect. Now thinking D tackle is Isaiah Bruce.
Yeah.
This running back, Mike Daniels type build where you have this really like leverage built in athlete who's super quick and twitchy, and then all of a sudden they can give him the ball. And that's what you see from Hawthorne in high school. And now he's up to 285, 290, really quick guy, gets out the ball fast. I think it's going to be a point where later in the season we see him a lot on rush downs and building out a 4-man rotation now. Pittman needs to step up and take a huge leap. I don't think anyone that watches Iowa football closely thought he had a good year last year. But that's the life of a backup D tackle in Iowa's scheme. We've seen guys like Logan Lee,
Noah Shannon,
Cedric
Lattimore,
Black, all those guys struggle in backup D tackle roles. But when they become the starter, I don't know if it's preparation, I don't know if it's confidence.
I think you catch rhythm. I think it's a big rhythm thing where you're getting these O-linemen who now are 40 snaps, or not many, but like 15 snaps into a game, and you're coming in cold.
Yeah.
I think that's a big piece of it.
Playing super physical. So I think Pittman, we liked him as a prospect, super long arm guy that's quick and has built-in leverage. There's no reason why he can't step in and turn into a good senior player. And I think that's what is really required this year. Even when bringing the transfers in, he's one of the most biggest developmental pieces on the defense. But having that D tackle depth also allows us to have pass rush and bull rush from our D tackle. So you can go into that.
Yeah, so I think this is a really lost art of what I was trying to do from a pass rush perspective. With this evolution of mobile QBs within college football, everyone's a 1 to 2 read QB, and then the third read is I'm going to try and escape the pocket, either through a guard center action where or not guard center, but guard tackle, that gap that you're trying to shoot through and be, or escaping outside the DNs and getting to the flats. How Iowa's then evolved to play this, essentially we've moved to like these 6'2", 6'3" outside linebacker DNs who are fast enough to be able to catch these QBs to the edge. But what we really need is interior pressure, not necessarily even to, flush the QB, but you need to make his feet uncomfortable as he steps up into that 10-yard in throw. And where we saw, Garbers from UCLA, we saw Childs from Michigan State. If you give these really talented, highly rated QBs who can stand tall in the pocket time to, let things develop, and we've talked about this a lot, but we really leave the middle of the field open for that 10-yard throw because we're anticipating interior pressure to either, draw a tip pass, draw, an action where the lineman runs into the guy and the ball sails, or he's just uncomfortable in that position. Mm-hmm. Without that interior action and out any flushing action at all, the whole defense really starts to crumble, especially between the 20s. And what you just pointed out is now if we could have 4 bodies there, where we're now, pass rush on even second and first down, where you're really exerting yourself to be able to force that O lineman back into the QB. If that becomes a bigger part of this defense, you're going to see our back end look a lot better.
Yeah.
I think just that extended time period. We saw it against Missouri, where essentially they said, like, if you're only going to send 4, and with how we align, we always talk about wanting Phil to blitz a little bit more, but if you're going to line up at 5 to 6 yards out the ball at every single position, your disguised blitz packages are pretty null. Like you're getting a linebacker from depth. You can drop one of your DNs and maybe some 5-man pressures from your slot corner, but
you can't overload without being obvious.
Yeah, your overloads are obvious.
Yeah,
and if you're blitzing, it's not going to hit quick. It's not going to be one of those aspects where you see those 6-man fronts and Penn State's on you in a blink, and it's 3rd and 10's not even a real down.
Oh, that's why the entire key is having a 4-man pressure. Yeah. And if you don't have depth and you don't have, the NFL DN that can generate a one-on-one win, even on second down, sometimes Ebenezer could. You think back to like 2018 against Nebraska, winning on 1st and 10.
Yep.
The scheme just doesn't work because you can't be. You're so obvious generally what you're running. You're lining up and showing these good receivers and good quarterbacks and good coordinators exactly what you're playing. But the key is that kind of boa constrictor type feel where I know where I want the ball to go, but I got guys in my face. I got a 6'5", 310-pound guard touching my toes. And I'm trying to put the ball over him, layer it over a linebacker, and layer it in front of a safety. That's a much different throw than when I'm just standing back there with a complete halo around me and I have no ability to get pushed. So I think you said it perfectly. Like, we just need to have D tackles that can give full bore reps the entire game. And that's where you could tell Black and Graves chose their spots this year, especially in the second quarter and some of these road games at night. You just feel like they're kind of hanging on a little bit. They're not,
playing as hard as they could. I mean, they're playing as hard as they can because they had to play the entire game.
Exactly. You're talking about 70 snaps from a D tackle perspective. Like, you can't 2nd and 10. A bull rush is maybe just locking out and making sure the guy doesn't beat your angle. Like,
yeah. Well, that's where where we really like to action that pass rush from a D tackle is that 3-tech spot, because it's usually a manned up one-on-one. And if you play your DNs with a little more outside leverage, then that really just becomes a one-on-one rush. And you think about now, Graves is going to be entering his senior year. He's been fantastic in that pass rush, but just again, if you're playing every rep, it's not going to look great. But now you broke out Hawthorne. That's really the guy that we're going to be looking at as a key piece in the pass rush scheme. You could, because likely you're going to pull, if it's a 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7 above, you're going to be pulling those guys off the field anyway. You're going to be playing 4 DNs.
Yeah.
But that's not how Iowa football operates a lot of times. Usually you're seeing the 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, just because we're playing that bend don't break, or we're trying to get a 3rd down. So then when that D tackle's on the field, his ability next year is going to be just integral to how well this team does.
Exactly. All right. I think it's time to break into the offensive transfers now.
Yeah.
Today's show is brought to you by Sun Singles Sunscreen. Convenient, single-use sunscreen packets created for every fan's on-the-go activities. For a limited time only, find our podcast's favorite team's game day packaging at the link below for the next tailgate. And don't forget to use code 10GOHAWKS for 10% off your purchase. That's code 10GOHAWKS.
So as the season ended, reasons for optimism when it came to the offense were pretty limited. I think you had, Sullivan obviously had moments with that Missouri game where he looked really strong. You could kind of talk yourself into maybe him being a full year starter, but you're likely looking at a best 8-win season just based on this decision making and this inability to protect himself is just clearly a big piece of how he plays football.
It's just he cannot. Same thing we saw against UCLA. Same thing we saw in the Missouri game. When he gets past his first read, he drops his eyes right away, and he's so late in his career as a senior. Obviously, as a starter, you still feel good about him because he showed that he's actually an incredible athlete in that game. But in the end, if you have a guy that's dropping his eyes that consistently, your offense really comes down to a first read team. And with the schedule that was upcoming, it felt like it was going to be an 8-win season.
But to be fair to Sullivan, without 2 drops on 3rd and 2s, honestly, a very consistent offensive performance against a very good Missouri team playing most of their dogs.
Yeah,
that was really just a testament to Lesser. You had Bowie step up and make some plays. He hadn't made a play essentially all year. He looked like a guy who's going to actually kind of emerge into a high-level receiver. But before we get off track here, there wasn't a ton of optimism about why the offense was going to take a step up from where it was at the end of the season. And obviously it had moments where it looked successful, but you couldn't project out, a competitive Big Ten season where you're maybe flirting with the playoff with this current offensive system or a skill set of players. Now you bring in Gronowski and Phillips, a hell of a job by Swarm. Those are two guys where obviously Phillips had interest from USC. He probably wasn't going to step in there and be a top 2 guy there. He's probably looking at like a third wide receiver skill set, but that's still, probably going to match the same amount of catches he'd get at Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gronowski obviously has a shoulder issue and is getting surgery on that. But you can't find a more experienced QB in the country than the guy that they brought in.
Mm-hmm.
He's obviously it's going to be a step up and there's going to be adjustments to that. I think the biggest thing for him is going to be the amount of pressure he feels on game day when it comes to stepping into stadiums of 70,000, 85,000, 100,000. That's a dramatic difference, and maintain his nerves there. But when you go in and break down his actual skill set and you mesh what Lester, showed from his schematic, playbook, those two really blend really well together.
Yeah. Yeah, they marry, perfectly. I think the one thing you actually see on Gronowski's film a lot is that 15-yard in route that Lester's constantly trying to get to. And Gronowski's a guy that, the amount of games he's played, he stands tall in the pocket, he goes through his progressions, and then he scrambles. It feels like he actually can get to his second and third read, and he stands back there with confidence. I think the biggest thing for him is you're no longer South Dakota State playing Incarnate Word, playing
Delaware,
Montana State, where you do have, truthfully, you watch a lot of Gronowski film. He's handing the ball off a lot. First and second down, it's lead inside, trap outside, pistol set. A lot of what Cade looked like at Michigan, where he's asked to throw about 200 yards a game, about 18 to 24 attempts, and not really go win the game for him. He's supposed to be, they have a holistic offense of where they're going to run for, I think they're second in yards per carry in the entire country in the FCS level. I think they had the best defense in the country at the FCS level. So he was on the Michigan. He was on the Ohio State. He was on the Penn State. And he was a really good player for him. I arguably he was the best FCS player in the country the last 4 years. You win, the MVP in the title game. You win 2 national titles. He arguably is the best player in the country at that level. But also he's on a team that is kicking ass on a lot of
and had the
different
Yankee
aspects.
twins who were
Yankee.
Yankee.
Yeah.
But the Yankee twins were his receivers for his first 3 years there, and were some of the best. When they came and played Iowa, they were better.
They're better than
they had
receivers.
better receivers than we had.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the case for this year because you actually have kind of a developed receiving core, but it's close.
They took a craft too, who's in the NFL making money. So.
Yeah. And a lot, that's a difficult part about watching these highlights is a lot of guys are just open. And that's not how it's going to operate against, the top 6 teams Iowa plays next year. So why I think this is a different scenario than Cade, even though you just laid out essentially some concerns around the level he's going to step up into, and where he looked good was he had a significant talent advantage. But what Iowa's going to ask him to do, and when you think about, the read option scheme that Lester has where he can get you on the edge against DNs, he has the speed to get around DNs. With linebackers, it's going to be pretty questionable. I don't think he's the level of athlete that Sullivan is, but it's close. But Sullivan really had a lot of getting to him.
Yeah.
And that's what you see, like a Riley Leonard also had, in those last couple of championship games. When you can really break that edge against a safety or corner or linebacker, you become a big problem. But what he does really effectively, and what we didn't see from Sullivan, is an ability to run intelligently. So we're not going to be terrified of getting this guy on interior QB power, because what he does is when he sees contact that's imminent, he makes sure to usually what you want to do is one cut to, get yourself off the platform where they're trying to hit you. And then you're starting to lean forward and dive and then take the hit as you go down. And he went 4 years without, any major injury, being a running QB that they'd run, 3 or 4 times a game. I think that's a really good indicator for what we're going to use him as, where we can trust you on the edge. You're not going to go out and get yourself killed. And that's going to lead to us being very comfortable in short yardage calls. Because anything at third and 2, third and 3, you go to that 5 wide set, you run a basic QB power, you can have, jet motions off it. All that now plays into being a ball control offense that you want to be. On the passing side of it, He does throw a very good fade ball. And I think where we're going to get to with Phillips is really going to be that wheel route receiver where he actually can get behind someone with his route running ability, and he's just going to be a tough guy to touch. Also, with our tight ends, Lester really likes to run the wheel with tight ends. I think that's going to be a big part of our attack with this guy if we can develop some stronger receiver play. Because Lester, when we ran it this year, we just didn't really have guys execute at the top of the route, and that's going to be a development we need to have. But the big piece is in breaking routes at 10 to 15 yards, he is able to survive the pocket with his athleticism, but he doesn't use it to scramble. He uses it to extend the play. And that's what we saw from Cade too, but Cade was also 6 feet tall with,
two different knees.
Two different knees.
Yeah.
And that really, broke down over time. With this guy, you start to marry out what we saw from Lester developing Sullivan. Sullivan came out and played that Missouri game really well. Now you get a guy who's confident in his ability, really understands how to play the position well. And then is going to have some actually fairly developed receiver talent. I think you come back with RVZ, 10 to 15 pounds heavier. You have Bowie starting to kind of emerge as a guy on the interior. Mix in Gill and Phillips. It's like you're going to kind of have a full.
Phillips is a key. His pedigree of being first team all conference preseason, having a great year and then being first team all conference in the postseason. That is someone that came with high expectation, is one of the 4 best skill players in that conference. Even if it's a lower level, you throw on the film, he's actually the one piece we've been missing in this offense. We have no true burner. Weegen should be that guy. He's got the speed for it. For whatever reason, we can't convert him to a receiver that can be a deep threat. The one play in Lester's offense that requires his speed, is that 15-yard to 20-yard post route. We saw Gill run against Northwestern, against UCLA, and I think we took a deep shot to Gill against Illinois State in the first game of the
Iowa
season.
State, you almost hit one to Caleb Brown. That was more of just a straight go. But
it's a straight go. But so you have this speed receiver that is now can kind of break, the top off the defense. Because you have everything else you need. You have your Scatty, Terrell Washington in the flats. You have your deep ins and deep outs in
your
Bowie
slants,
and RVZ. I think the number one development piece on offense, other than Moulton turning into a true RB1, is RVZ putting on 10 pounds and winning at the top of his routes. You constantly see guys got hands on him last year. He always felt like he was running with, a hand in his chest and not having the core strength and lower body strength to just fight those guys off. But then at the top of his routes, and when he did get separation when the ball was put on him, he made a bunch of plays. So I think that's one guy that you need to have a huge step up. And if you can go Phillips, RVZ, and Gill as your top 3 with like 6 other receivers in the wings, you can feel confident going into the season that those guys can be in a competition to produce a good offense with Gronowski.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I saw from Phillips was his top of the route talent. We saw this a lot from Noel at Iowa State, where what I look for is once you make your cut, do you keep that same amount of pace between you and the DB? And what we've really missed, outside of just the deep route where you can really put pressure on a guy to get over the top, is really clean out routes, really clean comebacks from just a developed guy. And his hands and the way he comes back to the ball too, you could just tell he's played a shit ton of football and he's made a lot of plays at the D1 level. And like that, there's just a different style of receiver play that when you see it, it's just a little bit like it's a step up. And I don't know if we have a guy that's that,
Gil confident, right?
Gil had moments, but it just didn't look the same. It's not like where you're doing the catch and run at the same time. You're not doing a lot after the catch. And I don't think he's going to be great after the catch because of his stature. And he has wheels, but it's not going to be his speed is not going to be a differentiator at the D1 level. Where I think his true talent's going to shine is route running and then hands.
Yeah, it's like Noel.
Yeah, exactly.
To a T.
Yeah, because Noel, I mean, he was with pace, but it's mainly how he could set you up. I saw an out and up that maybe want to vomit from Phillips because it reminded me what Noel did against us, and that scattiness against Penn State, Oregon. Those top DBs where they come out and have 6'2" guys, and you're going to throw out RVZ and Bowie who are going to try and manhandle those dudes, and that's just not going to work. The way the college game is called, physicality against physicality, unless you can go over the top on these guys who run really clean routes and draw PIs, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But so having this guy who's going to be tough to touch, when you have a guy who's around 5'8", 5'9", the reason that's a successful receiver build for a long time is their center of gravity is just so low. and they're
stocky dude,
and they're a stocky guy. So it's difficult to get hands on them. If they can get clean releases, and you saw multiple times in his film where he would have press man against him. And if you get a clean beat and at the top of the route, he knew how to stem him too, get back on top of him, set him up and beat him. That's where, when you play these, very aggressive man-to-man teams, having a highly skilled receiver in that aspect is going to keep us alive. Like, he's going to have an ability to get first downs against those top teams where, when we played Ohio State this year, it felt like you just couldn't get a first down into anything over 5 yards because the DBs were just going to be too in your face. And I think that's going to be a combination that's going to, take Iowa, to not necessarily a top tier passing offense, but it's going to give you an option.
I think, and that's what the option is, like what you need, right?
Yeah.
That is what we said when you watch us struggle against Nebraska, when you watch us struggle against UCLA. So you have to tier up your passing attack without a doubt. If you want to compete, you're not, say 1,000 times, you're not in the Big Ten West anymore. You can't just run the ball, punt, and play defense. Like, you have to throw.
You have to score.
You have to, and like, you're going to play better coordinators. They're going to have better ideas how to stop your run game and be more aggressive. It feels like Lester has the opportunity to use the mismatched toys he has to his full extent. Because Gronowski can throw any ball. Like, he has a deep post route that is very accurate. Against Incarnate Word, I think he had 3 throws over 30 yards. Those first 3 attempts were 30-yard completions. Put it on a dude's helmet every time. They were straight fly route, post route, and I think one like deep in, or like maybe another like fly, like post. And against Iowa in 2022, he ripped 2 25-yard out routes oppo hash. So he's on the right hash, left hash, 25-yard out route, and he's handed it to a guy in a shoebox. So he can, the entire field is in his playbook. And if you can have receivers that can attack every part of the field, even if that's their only skill set. I don't want Bowie or RVZ on a straight fly, but I want him on a deep end and a slant. I don't want Phillips on, something that resembles a deep end or RVZ's skill set. But you can use all these guys differently to create a holistic offense that can actually attack the entire field. And if you don't take that step with the schedule we're playing and the way these teams are recruiting against us and like where we have to go, like, we will be a 7-win team unless that passing game takes a step. I think he's got the bodies. You have to preach development, and you have to hope Gronowski keeps his confidence. I think that's so key for that Iowa State game early, is that if he's going to have so much pressure on him, and if the game all of a sudden just gets really fast where his guys aren't separating like they were at South Dakota State, you just don't want that Cade situation where Cade makes that back-breaking play against Iowa State, and then for the rest of the time we're taking the ball out of his hands, and maybe he's just kind of like losing that swagger he had coming in from winning. Gronowski's got 2 titles and was like 13-2 in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the big part for him is you can develop a rhythm as a running QB. You can make an imprint on the game in very simplistic ways where you can pick up a first down on a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. And it's where you saw Sullivan sometimes, develop this, ego to him as he's a QB just by making one play. And that's where Cade just didn't have that, that changeup where he could do anything besides throw the.
Felt like he belonged on the field.
Exactly. Why Cade didn't work is just because you couldn't pair him with dynamic receivers, a great O-line, and a great run game. Like, when he has to play game manager and he could make the reads and, progress through the play, he looked good. But anytime he actually had to go out and make a play himself, it just wasn't there.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's where I think this guy can make plays at the D1 level, and against even the highest level teams, he's going to be able to be comfortable out there with his athleticism and his strength.
I think he'll always feel comfortable. I don't know if he'll make plays against Oregon and Penn State. That's where I kind of draw a line. Is like, I think he'll feel fine out there. I don't think he'll be like, I can't outrun this DN. But Sutton at DN is a little bit different than what Incarnate with Word was throwing at DN.
Yeah.
And the tackle he has doesn't have an advantage over that guy. And so, I still think Sullivan's a tier up of an athlete, and he could feel comfortable, really comfortable against any team, truly, until he took a huge shot or, actually had to throw. But that's where you want to be really excited about Gronowski, but it's going to come down to his arm more than his legs. I think that's where you do see a lot of accuracy at, deep throws. He has to be Brock Purdy in terms of like pro style running the offense. Can he keep his confidence? Can be extremely accurate and decisive, and can he throw into windows that are going to be tight? Like, it's going to be a different window in every aspect. The D tackle's going to be bigger, the linebacker's going to be bigger, faster, and the corner's going to be tighter on that receiver because it's not a Yankee brother cooking some FCS 6-win team. It's going to be a Penn State cornerback, having an in route going. I'm sometimes in front of him.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes like touching him. He has to be extremely accurate in those situations, and
it's gonna be big moments too. That's I think that's where I worry is those gigantic moments at home, on the road, third down, fourth quarter.
and that's where the pedigree comes from. Like, the dude's a winner.
Yeah.
And it's all about keeping that
positive momentum
and like
confidence.
I truly, looking back at this 2024 season, rewatching a lot of games, that Iowa State game was so critical for this team. Like watching the Michigan State game, just didn't come out with focus in the first half, blew a bunch of third downs, weird confidence the entire time. UCLA, you could tell the team wasn't locked in.
Yeah.
Like the level of effort wasn't there. Obviously, we have a player quit the next week. Like it was just a weird season, and it all stemmed from that Iowa State loss. So you could convince me. You beat Iowa State. You look at the schedule. There's an opening to Indiana at home in a massive spot, possibly, and then Penn State after that, and at Wisconsin. I think between it, you have to start fast.
But if you do start, like, it's not an unreasonable scenario to walk into Iowa State. You're going to have the same advantages that we've had in the past against them. You're going to stop the run. You're going to likely run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
If we could take that step in the passing game where it could be a little more consistent, I'm still probably going to project next year as a win just because they lose Noel and Higgins, which was their two ways to be really effective against us. Beck's obviously a great player, but I think even the line will probably shade us maybe a point or two.
Yeah, I think it'll be like a 1 point favorite.
And then you get Indiana at home, obviously working off of they're a great team. They're going to be a good team again. But you had a weird year of like JMU being able to plug every hole for them. I don't know if they're going to have the same level of talent at QB. Rourke was a unique situation. They obviously brought in a pretty high level guy, but Rourke really made that team go. Like that, he was exceptional when they were playing at a high level.
They could run the ball well too. I think it was an older offensive
You're also
line.
getting probably a top 15 opponent, Kinnick, where it's going to be pandemonium. Yeah. As long as you have a strong start there, you're going to have a chance in the game. That really then sets up, that first game, home game against Penn State. As long as you can survive those first two games, so obviously we didn't have the strong start we wanted.
You still got Wisconsin in there too.
You do, but Wisconsin's just in turmoil.
I don't feel confident ever going at Wisconsin. I don't care what our team looks like.
Yeah, but regardless, you set a little bit of expectations.
Yeah,
if you can go clean into that Penn State game, that's likely game day because Penn State's going to be ranked top 5 next year to start the season. As long as they can stay clean to start, that's going to be gigantic setup. That's a fun thing to think about.
That's what's like terrifying about this schedule too. It's like we just talked about beating a playoff team in Indiana, winning at Wisconsin, winning at Iowa State,
a ranked Iowa State.
That's just 3 of the first 5 games.
Yeah,
and then at Rutgers too. I think it's like our first Big Ten game too. I want to say, I'd say at Rutgers is the one game that I'm like, if we won't lose that. Like we play Rutgers.
They're trying to do
3 times the last 4 years. They're just trying to beat us, but worse at it. And that's only 3 games though. You had the 2 horrible non-con games at Albany and whoever we're playing, UMass. Those are locks. But when we used to be in the Big Ten West, there was 6 locks a year, at least 5, and then 8 of them were we're going to win, probably 75% chance.
But the start of the season, it would be 6 locks. But by the time you look back on the schedule, I'm like, damn, there's 8 bad teams.
We beat 8 bad teams and then split between 2 solid
7
teams
and 5
in Minnesota and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about your 4th easiest game. What is it?
Minnesota at home.
Yeah, a team that has been progressing as an 8-win team.
Could have been a 10-win team this year if they had some breaks.
Yeah. That's your 4th easiest game. You're going to at USC. At USC in 2018 would have been our 2nd hardest game. For sure.
Yeah.
And then you're just going Michigan State at home, a team that just put up 400 yards, bring back Childs. That's just a late home game in November. And you can't even think about that game because you have Oregon the week prior and then at Nebraska the last week. Every single game, the middle of the schedule, when you think about all those mid-tier programs that do something exceptionally well, they recruit extremely well. They actually recruit equal to you. You have
QB and receiver there, where we saw the differentiator from previous seasons and why this scheme worked so well for Phil for a long time is you just didn't have a single QB and receiver in the Big Ten West that was competent outside of Purdue. And Purdue lit us up for 4 years in a row because they actually had time.
Or Quentin Cephas was essentially the one other guy.
Yeah. Hornibrook and Cephas could go for 150 on you at some point. But other than that, but Braum always had success because it's you're going to let me throw the ball with no pressure on first and second down
every time.
we're going to eat.
Yeah, it's just one of those schedules that you could go 9-3, pull a massive upset, and you felt like you had an incredible season, but like you finished like ranked 20th.
Yeah.
And like maybe you lost to a rival in like a bad spot. The new reality of Iowa football is that if we get to 10 wins next year, you had an incredible year. Like you probably lost to Oregon and Penn State, but you had to go win at USC, at Nebraska, at Wisconsin, beat Minnesota, beat Michigan State, beat Indiana, beat at Iowa State. It's like 6 good wins, 5 good wins.
Yeah.
Really good wins. That ones that you would circle in certain years, be like, no way, I should have a good team. Like that is the realities that you have to go string together a lot of those.
I think that sets up for a better season, though. Even if it doesn't lead to more wins, I would rather be surviving week to week and playing 8-4, 9-3 seasons as like good seasons, rather than having like the 10-2 season where you lose to the worst Minnesota team in like 5 years.
Yeah,
and you survive against the bottom half of the Big Ten West.
Well, yeah, you're a 10-win team in 2023, and you had the Illini at home, and they looked like the better team for like 60% of that game. We were there, and it was like, we're gonna lose this game, and then we're like, oh, we're 10 wins Big Ten champs. It's like, no, that was like a 6-win.
No, that was a Big Ten championship celebrating. I remember like Kinnick was odd at the end of it. It's like if you just won the Big Ten West, that should be a pandemonium moment.
Yeah,
it was like, we just kind of looked bad against Illinois.
Yeah, they kind of made a big play.
Paddock came in and threw for 300 yards.
Yeah.
And
so like it is a different reality, and we should go through like what are the, before we get to Twitter questions. Thanks everyone for submitting
what are
those
concerns about.
But like, what is your, now that you see the schedule, we talked about the transfers that are going to elevate it. Let's just go position by position and start like feelings of the room. And it's starting on offense. We haven't talked about running backs yet.
Let's start at corner.
Okay.
Corner's like, I think if you're going to highlight something that hasn't been addressed in the team yet, receiver, QB, D tackle.
Yeah.
Like if I had to go top 3, I'd be like, that's where we are not competing at that next year without significant transfer portal players. Mm-hmm. They went out and nailed all 3 positions.
Yep.
Next time you're looking for an all-inclusive beach vacation, consider Via Puesta del Sol or Via Puerto Escondido, both of which overlook the Pacific Ocean in Ocotal, Costa Rica, providing an exceptional all-inclusive experience for your family and friends. Visit their website, linked down below, for more information or to reserve your trip today.
Corner, obviously, they're still in the market for one. I think you're likely going to see a guy get plucked. We've had this discussion a lot amongst the two of us, but we haven't seen a transfer corner come in and play and start for Iowa for, probably good reason. Phil has played such a unique system of defense where you're really like playing these guys in a position where they need to have 2 or 3 years of reps negotiating the space between them and the receiver. Playing line up and playing press man, if you have guys talented enough to do it, or even like a cover 3 match out of a quasi press set, it's a very simplistic way to play defense, but it also allows guys who are young and raw to go out and just play football.
Mm-hmm.
When you play this more educated style where there's a lot of guessing, a lot of reading your reads and trying to negotiate space, that takes a lot of time to do. With the current guys, with Lee, Hall, Nestor, Godfrey, and Jalen Watson, there just isn't. I mean, I think Hall is going to step in and have. He's obviously struggled a lot, but when it comes to body type, body composition, athleticism, all that kind of stuff, he is going to be an all Big Ten player next year, if I had to guess. You've seen guys struggle throughout their career and then turn on their senior year where they just look like a different player.
Ojemudia, Riley Moss, Jamari Harris. Like Jamari obviously flashed in 2021.
But Ojemudia is a perfect example. Guy who got on the field as a sophomore, was abused at Michigan State in 2017. Had 2 touchdowns given up. Everyone's like, Ojemudia's bad. And then all of a sudden you get to his senior year and it's like, this guy's the best corner in the league. Mm-hmm. Almost like could have won us a game against.
Because it's a confidence position. You have to be the alpha on the field, alpha in your room.
But I feel good about Hall.
Yeah.
But then you go to the other side and your options just aren't very strong. Lee, when it comes to size, I've talked about this ad nauseum, with how we want to play defense and how we're leaving these guys on islands and giving them a lot of time to, have to cover a guy. He's just not the body type I want out there. Watson kind of fits into almost the same build where it's like he's a little bit too small to play through people, to play at the top of routes. Could see with, if we're not going to pressure a guy fast, he's going to, get not abused, but there's going to be some against these top teams, they're going to be able to execute against them at a high level. Where I'm actually kind of excited to see is Rashad Godfrey made a late jump in bowl prep where he became the backup corner. I think he actually unseated Watson there because Nestor was the opposite guy. He is at like that 6'1", 6 foot build, played a lot of safety in high school. That's actually what we see a lot. I don't know if he played a lot of safety, but he had safety moments, but he also played corner. But he's a big corner who tackles well.
Yeah.
I think where we had, an embarrassment of riches was our corner position. We didn't really know it. Moss and DeJean are both guys that are playing in the NFL. Jamari's obviously going to be a drafted guy. That was a 3 or 4 year run where those guys were our star players and really, probably covered up a lot of warts that we had in the pass rush and other aspects of our game plan. Now not having that dominant corner where you're like, this guy's for sure NFL. I think Hall could potentially be, but the opposite guy, there's just no one there right now. You're going to need a gigantic step up from the D-line play to cover that other corner's ass. If you go into the season without bringing in a transfer portal, I think at this point, Godfrey has to be the guy if we're talking about new faces there, or Jalen Watson if he puts on a lot of weight. But it's got to be a new face. But if it's Lee and you're just banking on senior Lee to step out there and make plays for 12 games, you're going to see the same warts pop up where there's going to be 3 or 4 games where he gives up 150 yards to some receiver. And that's not sustainable from an Iowa football program. If we're going to be ball possession and have our obvious limitations on offense, you really need an all-star defense and all-star special teams if you're going to survive in this, medium space. And having that one CB2 out there without, a dominant player out there, it just becomes this giant question mark where it's like, where do we go? And maybe it's Zach Lutmer.
Yeah, I do think that'd be interesting to move Lutmer out to corner or Entringer too. Both bodies that are just like larger and let him play more of a zone type role. But I disagree with you to a point. Like, I think Hall and Lee were in the worst cornerback mental situation possible. You had Jamari playing at all Big Ten level, pretty much from snap one, game one, making plays. I think had a crazy pick against Illinois State and kind of that RPO pick right away, solidify himself, like 24-year-old, like senior, probably just being the guy in that room. And then they were battling from one spot, trying not to make mistakes. And Lee basically won the job. Hall won the job because he was a bigger, better athlete. And like you watch few Hall reps where he's glued to guys through breaks, and he's got this like fluid hip movement where he can run with everyone. And that's how he saw the field. But then he just broke down by giving up double moves. So Lee comes in. He's like, I'm not going to give up double moves. But then he got lunched on 15-yard out routes, comebacks, and ends, anything that gave him, where he was on his back foot, not getting beat by double moves. They're both playing not confidently, both being interchanged every game. That's never worked for Iowa. When we pull corners, the guy who comes in afterwards always struggles still. I can think back to that Nebraska game, the even David Bell game, where we're pulling Ojemudia, or we're putting in, I can't remember who it was back then.
Hankins?
It was Hankins, yeah. And you're doing that changing game. Like corner, especially this corner, you have to be like on the front foot guessing. And these guys coming in as seniors next year, I don't think they're going to be feeling pressure from the guys behind him. I think Watson needs to continually put on weight. We like him as an incredible athlete. He's obviously the #1 draft pick in our recruiting class. He will get there in some aspect on the field. But I think having those both guys be seniors, and I'm not seeing a transfer come in. Like, because what transfer means is that they're NFL. Because Watson and Lee, Lee and Hall, as much as we want to talk down to them in the Iowa football space of how great corners we've had, if you are better than that guy who's been playing this system for 4 years, you are a draft pick in the NFL. There's no doubt in my mind. If you're going to start over him, you have to be draftable. And I don't see a transfer draftable corner coming in the spring of this year at Iowa.
And learning the scheme, and
it just doesn't make sense. Where's that guy lit? Like, it might have been the Miami Ohio kid. It might have been someone else right now, but you have to bring in an NFL corner in a spring window and then have him beat out a senior. So I think it's going to be those two guys, and I have a weird confidence that mentally they both are going to have a way more solidified role in this system. And the same reason why you feel like Pittman could take a step up is to have I'm not looking over my shoulder, especially at a position like corner where you got to be rolling on confidence. That has to be, I am the best player in this room, and I have to be making plays. I'm the Doughboys where I'm not just thinking through surviving these plays. I'm trying to action myself into interceptions and the deflections and all that. And I think that's where I live. It's like, I think corner is the one thing I see a lot differently than other Iowa fans, is because you have to trust in Phil to a T, a little bit. And I think this is finally, you went through growing pains, but they both have shown aspects of, really good high level play. And I think 2023, Lee had a great season. I think against Illinois, I remember a few reps in that game where he played really well.
Nebraska had a great final game against Nebraska.
Like Lee's, obviously Hall is a really good athlete. So I think that's where I say, I was like, if those two guys are our senior corners, I'm not going to be freaking out as much as other people will be, because I think it's a really big confidence role, and I like the body types, and I like the athleticism.
I just think it says a lot, though, that in the bowl game, when it came time for man-to-man, that Lutmer was playing on Weiss. Weiss was obviously their top target.
I think that was more so we didn't feel like any of those guys were good enough to mirror him. Thus, they had Weiss in the slot the entire game. Thus, Lutmer got him. That was my thing. I don't think, because when it's Hankins, we would move Hankins around the field to mirror man-to-man.
Mm-hmm.
Moss, we mirror with man-to-man. But if you don't feel confident someone's like that much more of an athlete, then you don't mirror. Thus, Lutmer gets him.
Yeah,
I think that's what it was.
But I'm saying he just looked good in man-to-man against him. He was in his hip. So I know they don't like to do late switches on guys positionally, and corners probably a position you probably want to start at and take a ton of reps at.
Time to move on to safety. I think we've set our piece. But I think that's where.
But I was gonna go through safety. It's like I'm really excited for where safety's at. I think Entringer's been buying his time. I think he's willing to step in and make a lot of plays. Got mentioned that X might be moving to free safety. I think that'd be a better position for him to be more of the thinker back there, and also then be the extra body to tackles. That's like a perfect scenario where he's not, when you run that strong safety, occasionally they can isolate you a little easier than you do at free safety.
Mm-hmm.
And when we saw him get isolated, against Weiss, against Missouri, a couple other scenarios, he doesn't really have that quick twitch. So, taking some of that, athleticism ask off him and moving him back to being a thinker and extra body. I think that's
downhill.
Downhill, that's a really good spot for him. And then if you maybe move then Lutmer to strong safety, maybe play entering at strong safety and then Lutmer at cash.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of interchangeability, but those three guys together, just super talented group.
Well, it's like if you would have talked about our recruiting classes from the last 4 years, and you're like, oh, your safety class, like your cash, strong safety, and free safety are going to be Lutmer, Entringer, and Wampa.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, hell yes, that's going to be a good defense. And that's kind of the core of this tackling team. All three are thumpers. All three play hard. All three are smart and athletic. So I think if you look at the strength of this team, one of the best rooms will be those three guys.
Yeah, and then linebacker, we feel very confident about where that's going to be at too.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of bodies there. We've mentioned Nolan DeLong a couple times as a walk-on. I think he's going to have a real chance at making a splash at the will. We want to see Shire at middle. I think he's been the guy we identified as when he was signed as a junior out of high school. Obviously, a really small school. I think it was Iowa Valley. But just a very fluid athlete, understands the game really well. He might not be that thumper you had with Higgins and Campbell. He's built a little bit slighter than those guys, but he can really run.
I think Shire's going to be the one guy that if you're not a kind of a hardcore recruiting guy or don't follow a lot of podcasts, he's going to pop up next year and they're like, where the hell has this guy been?
Mm-hmm.
I think he will play middle, not to Higgins level, but close. And I think if he's that weak, I think he'll actually be better than Nick Jackson was at that role. I still remember 2022 spring ball. And he was getting a lot of run. I think maybe some Benson was banged up or something like that. I'm like, this guy looks like the prototypical Iowa linebacker. Just 230, can run, hit, physical. We've seen him on kickoffs, detonate on people. This is one of those, the beauty of Iowa football is these players that can sit in the wings for a long time, don't transfer, and then they get their opportunity and then they go play in the NFL for 10 years. I think Shire's one of those guys where he has a great year. He's, second team All Big Ten, possibly third team All Big Ten. Some NFL team drafts him, and he's playing for 8 years in the NFL. So it's one of those fun things about when you follow recruiting closely and a guy's about to step up into a big role. I think he's going to have a great season.
Well, Rex Roth is going to have an opportunity. They're probably going to keep him out at Leo, though, because that's just where he's been developing. Harold, you weren't crazy about him in the recruiting process. I see him kind of in that same Higgins mold where he's just the thumper who's going to, if he can get to you, he's going to tackle you. But obviously showed some slow feet at moments against Michigan State when I think he got, or was it UCLA when he was playing?
Yeah.
And that was always concerned with him is he was a little bit plotty. But I don't want to completely diminish that because we saw Higgins in limited time when he first got on the field and that slow feet really showed up. If you can get Harold playing confidently and flowing fast, I think he's a giant kid. Yeah. He's going to be a good linebacker for us. I'm not going to be too dismissive of him as being a starter next year, but he also might be that that backup linebacker who just stayed healthy for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And within the Iowa football program, I think there's a a large push for guys who stay healthy. And Shire's been hurt every single year. So, you move into this year, maybe that allows Harold to get a step up at middle linebacker. But when it comes time to who's the best player that we can play, I think potentially Shire ends up taking middle linebacker over, and you move more to like a Scatty or Will linebacker in that Nolan DeLong, potentially Derek Weiskopf, Rex Roth,
Buffington,
Van Kecker, we haven't talked about Buffington yet.
Yeah, I think Buffington would be a really good week or a really good middle.
I think Buffington makes sense at just middle.
Who was so if we're in the 2023 class linebackers? Oh, all right, we're gonna make it a side here.
Yeah,
Keeter.
Yeah,
come back and play football.
Yeah,
like watching your film from the 2023 class, correct? It was like Lutmer and him we thought Keeter, after watching him for the first time, was like, this is number one recruit in the class. This kid's got $20 million in his back pocket if he comes and plays middle linebacker for Iowa. I know he's at like 260 right now, and everyone's like, oh, play him at the end. Play this guy, come back, cut down to 240, whatever you're at. Wrestling has been developing you perfectly for that position. I don't care that you've been playing football. I'd almost rather have my football players wrestle than even like play spring ball, truthfully. Like that is it's maybe linebacker, maybe not like an elbow tackle or something like that. But Josie Jewell has made $20 million in the league. Campbell has made $20 million in the league. Higgins is going to make $10 million in this league, minimum. I don't know if you can say to a wrestler, how good of a wrestler you have to be to make that money. I think there's a real almost certainty in my brain if you play for 3 straight years.
If you developed within the Iowa scheme with his toughness, athleticism, and power, it's just an eventuality that he becomes a Big Ten, like all Big Ten middle linebacker.
Yes, and
he's got the size,
second,
speed.
Third rounder, like the explosiveness when he gets to contact and gets, I think back to his second play in his highlight film, shoots their line, grabs a guy equal with him, hips equal, power bombs him instantaneously.
Yeah,
that is, you don't see that type of power through someone's hips, other than like Campbell. And Campbell didn't even have that type of hip power. It was more like was a freight train. Keeter is going to make an insane amount of money in the NFL. Come play football. And that's one thing we'll say.
Yeah, and I think the distinction is that he is the man in wrestling.
Yeah.
You're a starter. You're not trying to beat out 3 or 4 guys. I imagine even going into the next year, he's going to have to unseat Harrell, who's going to be a 5th-year middle linebacker.
Yeah.
So it's like a question of whether, but I think him being a fully developed redshirt sophomore, you probably still give him the nod.
I think if Higgins leaves last year, I think he's our starting middle linebacker as a true sophomore. No doubt in my brain.
Yeah.
That was one of those films where you just take the lumps. Campbell was like 220 as in 2019, and we're like, play middle linebacker, dude. Like, you're a heat-seeking missile.
Yeah.
And that's all middle linebacker is. It's not really that hard of a position in Iowa. Like, obviously, you got some calls and stuff.
But they keep you clean.
You're clean, see ball, get ball.
Yeah.
And that's truly what it comes down to. And if you want the murderer on your team to be the murderer of the state, that's the guy.
Yeah.
And I think if he was coming to be middle linebacker next year, I'd be like, we're going to be a top 5 defense. So I think that's a really key piece. And we can go into more linebackers. Talk about what's actually on the team right now.
No, but I'm fine with that pitch. I think it's, get it out there in the ether. Let someone, I'm sure people do the money talk with him, but it's like, man, you're NFL.
You're NFL, and it's like almost undeniable.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about D tackle, D end. Obviously, Herkett's coming back, kind of playing that Joe Evans role of like being the senior leader there. Really good run defender. Going to rotate down to D tackle probably now for on rush downs. Llewellyn, the more I watched 2024 games, the more I liked him. Just super explosive. Has the spin move and has another rip through move that both are really legitimate. If you told me this guy had Anthony Nelson type senior year and went to the NFL, I'd believe you. Really key part of this team.
I think he's going to be the NFL guy that emerges at the end.
Yeah.
I think that's really where that position takes a leap, is he becomes the pass rushing. Like, I'm getting home a third of the time I get this opportunity.
Yeah.
That's what you just didn't have from that side. Like with Craig, I don't know. He had a couple of moments in the bowl game, but that was, late developing passes. If you can get that 3-step drop where we're getting pressure on you, 5-step drop where we're getting pressure on you instantaneously, that's where this defense takes a leap, and I think he's that guy.
Yeah.
Then you obviously have Eo's Yepin has to step in. I think from a physical standpoint, he might be the biggest D end on the field. Like, from the minute he gets to Iowa, he's already 270. I don't know if we build him any bigger than that now.
We'll probably get up to 290 on
if
him.
He is technically sound enough, I'm sure he's been taught by AG.
He is.
I know he's technically, but it's going to come more down to how well do you play the run. I don't think Iowa lets you on the field unless you can show that you understand your run assignment. I think AJ's probably, explain that to him thoroughly enough, like where you need to be at. I really do think even with the depth you have, you got Merriweather sitting there, you got Allen sitting there. Both those guys aren't Eozi Epineza. Like he's just a larger body than both of those guys.
I think Merriweather is one of those guys where I could see him.
Yeah, but he's 255. He's not 270.
He's quick.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I think.
But I don't think Merriweather's an every down D end within this current system. I think you could play.
I think he can be.
But I'm saying like Merriweather, third down.
Yeah.
Perfect scenario for him. But I think you just play the bigger dude when it comes to Iowa football.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just, especially at the end. A luxury of where you have a well-moving 270 guy who's technically sound.
I think Merriweather's going to be 258, if my guess. 261.
Yeah.
And he's long.
Yeah, but AJ played at 290.
Yeah. No, Epineza is like the future. But I think this DN room is like, we talk about Joseph Anderson, Merriweather, Brian Allen, Llewellyn, Herkett. That's what, 5 guys?
5 guys, yeah.
Right? And then we're not even considering somebody there either.
No, I think
that's all 5.
That's all of them, yeah.
But that's 5 NFL guys, in my mind.
Yeah.
Like Herkett, I think, we've said it multiple times that we think he's going to switch to the other side of the ball. Like
he's going to play that Wham tight end, fullback.
But I think the other 4 guys, Joseph Anderson, we love. Merriweather, we love. Brian Howell, we love. Llewellyn, we loved. You got to hop all those guys who are now like Anderson's
not going to be there weight-wise.
You don't know that for sure.
Fairly certain.
But the other 3 are. Llewellyn, Allen.
Allen's 6 feet tall.
Yeah. He's bigger at 6 feet.
6'1".
Yeah. But he's also
Merriweather. Merriweather's the guy that I could see being dynamic enough. But it's like, I think I bet Epineza's got the heads up, like the head start on scheme and technique.
Yeah.
Like I just, if you want your defense to be as good as possible, and you want to be, we talked about how important that DN pass rush is. If this guy can come in and make plays for you, and he's going to be the biggest fucking dude on the team.
Yeah.
So it's like that distinguishes yourself as a freshman. Your biggest concern is the strength. Strength's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So it's like, is he smart enough to play the position?
Yeah.
Like probably.
Yeah. I just really like Merriweather.
I like all the guys.
Yeah.
I think they're all great players. I just think when you have a truly special talent at such a integral piece to this defense, you can't play senior card ball or upperclassman ball. You got to go play who's the best player. It's like the Gene. Like we probably should play him as a freshman that year.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, I think it's time to move on to offense.
Yeah.
Like number one thing, if you're going to circle one position of like, oh crap, left tackle.
Yep.
Like you got Dunker at right tackle, right guard, so many bodies. Pieper, Leighton Jones, Lauk, Malinsky, like four guys. All 4 of them, any of them started a rep there. 1 rep will be like, fine. Those are all really good players. We really love Leighton Jones way back in the day.
Leighton Jones is a stud.
Like Pieper's
obviously
seeing the field early.
Yeah, and just has that perfect bend to him. Like there's just something you see with interior line play, and it's usually wrestlers. They just get this bend to them where they're flexible enough and athletic enough. And once you see that, it's like, okay, well, that guy's a gold star.
Yeah.
And Pieper's that perfect dude.
And you bring back Stevens, Jones, and Dunker. So the O-line is like, truthfully, it should be not the same level it was this year, but close. Because Colby obviously was 4-year starter, Richmond 4-year starter. Can't expect those guys to step in, but you expect the other 3 to step up even more. I think Stevens is one of those guys that, like, if he hasn't been banged up throughout his entire career, would be a lot more hyped up. He has some extreme reps.
He's NFL.
Like, he's really good.
Yeah, he can shove you out of a gap, and that's
it's
all
a lot
I need
of
to do a guard.
2 big maulers for sure. And now but left tackle, there's not, like, Dotzler is the one body on the team. We've talked about on our Patreon that I've watched every single lineman come through. Obviously, Will Nolan and McCaslin, 2 really good tackles coming in. They were true freshmen this year.
Won't be ready.
And those are my 2 favorite recruits other than Dotzler at tackle. Lauk has always seemed like an upperclassman guard. He kind of always had that Ellsbury mind to me where I was like, when he's a redshirt sophomore and a redshirt junior, he's a right guard, left guard. And like he was a backup left tackle in the depth chart. I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know if he's a true tackle build, especially at that age. And I would like to see Dotzler. We've heard that maybe he's not built, at the 330 level that he should be at his size, or, maybe he's a lean 310.
It might be that Jack Plum where you're not strong enough at that 6'6", 6'7".
Yeah, and but he can move really well. Like I think just thinking back to his film, like that kid, he's like really twitchy and like long and like fast. So he does it makes sense if he's our left tackle. It just, who is that guy going to be? And I think that's a portal. Spring portal guy, bring in some, really experienced left tackle. He's used to pass setting. Run block is obviously not going to fit well with us because Kirk has his mindset of like what running block needs to look like. But maybe bring in someone that can go compete for that position that can really pass.
Yeah, at least provide some depth if those two guys aren't ready. I think it has to be Dotzler because Lauk, we just saw from him, it's just the movement's not there. You're really playing a guard at tackle, and
he works for Dunker.
It works for Dunker. And at the end of the day, with how quick the Leicester scheme operates, we're really not looking for long developing play action plays. Anything, that's everything's just quick design.
Mm-hmm.
We're playing essentially option football when we throw the ball. It's not the end of the world if you end up playing a guard at tackle.
Yeah.
But it's not ideal either.
Yeah. It's not a Lark or Worf stepping in there, though.
No.
Which is not ideal.
Which, I mean, we could talk about. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but just the tackle development has just taken such a dramatic step off.
Mm-hmm.
And our recruiting at that level is you're just not getting the guys that you used to.
Well, you should have got Nick Brooks and you should have got Proctor.
Yep.
That's the difference.
Yep.
Moving on to running back. That's like the last room, right? We've done receiver, quarterback, offensive line. Running back we're really late in this episode and we still haven't talked probably about our best room. And Moulton, rewatching the games yesterday, he's close. Like Caleb Johnson obviously had the runs of that smooth stride, like breaking this tackle at the second level. Moulton is faster in the first 3 steps. That's what I came up with. It's like in those first 3 explosion, just getting vertical. Like it's that Wadley quick first step. Shame to bring that name up, but
it is. That's what it looks like.
It's that crazy vertical burst. Yeah. And I think of that pitch play where we're pitching it out. It looks like an outside, we're trying to hook the edge, trying to get the D gap into the sideline. And then it's actually coming off C gap and it's actually like a mid zone we're running. I think that play is going to be perfect for him because he's going to take 1 step, put his foot in the ground and get vertical. And I truly we've had a lot of our Twitter stuff we'll talk about later about saying like Moulton we expect to be like a really good player this year, possibly a Doak Walker guy. Like, I don't know about Doak Walker. I don't know how he's going to progress that far, but he has the tool set.
Well, just you think about his progression from where we saw him as a freshman, got in the field as a freshman. This year took a significant leap again. Now he's going to be like third years where you usually take your step within college football.
8 more pounds on him.
Yeah,
a little
bit more weight.
stockier.
But and also then you're now the guy. We talked about that aspect too. It's like you could take a little more leniency with where you're cutting, where you're taking you're trying to make plays. And
my expectation is really high for him. It's as high as you can get for that running back position, other than probably what my expectation was for Caleb Johnson after the Nevada game as a freshman.
Yeah.
And then Patterson as your RB2.
Perfect. Our second running back. Pounder, short yardage.
Fights for every yard.
Incredibly tough too.
Yeah.
And you just need that guy as a running back too. If you're going to be in short yardage, you want to hand it off to someone who's just going to go die for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Patterson's your dude. Obviously, Xavier Williams we liked in the recruiting process. I think Dahl adds a different dimension where you have some real speed in the receiving game. I think where he breaks into the system next year is in that 3rd and 4 passing game where you're just running that arrow to the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And you need a guy with incredible pace that's going to really stretch that edge.
Yeah.
I think that's where he's going to fit in. And obviously, running back wheel. One day we will see that from Dahl, and that's going to be the greatest day of my life.
Yeah.
That's all I want to see is a 4.3 speed running back wheel where you got a linebacker chasing him. He's going for 60.
Yeah. I think it just goes back to Terrell Washington's obviously floating between running back and receiver.
He looked good though.
He's another really talented athlete, but it goes back to that receiver room where it's they've done actually a really good job of building out 3-star skill.
Yeah.
For what they were given in terms of offensive production to what next year looks like as a whole, Betts has done a great job. Tight end room's in a good spot, and receiver is just really deep.
As good as it can be, as from where we were at.
Yeah.
You think about all the negative recruiting that was available to be attacked by Leicester. It's just odd to see continuity going into an offseason around those positions. You're seeing mass exodus every single year where it's 2 top guys gone. And that's just a testament to.
You'll see some transfers probably this spring at receiver.
You will. And running back, I'm sure you'll see one.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be your top guys aren't getting plucked. Yeah. I think Leicester can, he's doing a hell of a lot better job of selling these guys and being a more likable personality within the room. I think is taken. That's really where we're at. Every time you see Leicester talk, it's man, that just guy seems like a guy you want to hang out with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, I think it's time to move into
Questions?
Yeah.
We are happy to announce a new sponsor for the ANF Podcast. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
All right, so first question's from Aiden7. He's like been a long-time follower of us, and obviously a big Hawk fan. Feels like the burner network. Leicester's offense will come into full swing, and Moulton will continue K2 success at RB. I think this is like the Leicester season in my eyes. Like whatever we can produce offensively this year with the QB, obviously we're bringing in. You have retention at lineman, offensive line, retention at tight end, retention at quarterback, receiver, and then Moulton is your key piece of this offense.
You also have defensive coordinators who are now aware of your scheme.
Right. So this is and a really difficult schedule. So whatever this looks like, whatever Moulton can look like, whatever Leicester can make this offense look like, is what will be repeated year after year. I have a hard time believing that if Leicester gets his guys in, there's going to be a different outcome.
I think the receiver room is the biggest difference because it's clear that we need 6'1", 6'2" bodies who can go block up on safeties, get over the middle of the field, and those guys are still young.
Yeah.
Terrence Smith and RVZ, I think are the two guys. If we're going to become this new, inverted offense where our receivers are going to play more of our tight end role now.
Yeah.
Those are like the recruited positions where, you look 2 or 3 years down the road when Smith and RVZ are seniors and juniors. That's where we'll take our last step. But
I agree with this comment. I think Moulton is primed to have like an all Big Ten year.
Yeah.
I think that's where I see it. And
second team, third team.
So
yeah. I agree.
Also, congrats to Aiden, Bo Nix on the Broncos. Love watching him play. You guys got your franchise QB. Iowa Cub. Iowa won't win 8 games for the first time in a full season since 2014.
That's kind of a tough one. I say no. I think we, with the portal additions, shoring up D tackle is my biggest concern for the whole year. Like honestly, I would have rather had the 2 portal additions at D tackle.
Don't say out loud.
Than QB. But it just I see the whole scheme built around how well those guys play. Yeah. When it comes, like if you think about bend don't break defense, you think about protecting the ball on offense. D tackle is just so goddamn important to this team.
Yeah.
And with those additions, you're going to be going back to playing more of Iowa football. You mix in what we saw from Rise late too.
Mm-hmm.
Being that punter is such a large aspect of this game too.
We didn't get to talk about special teams, though.
That's fine. But that punter being such a large aspect of this team, and then Stevens stepping into like going to be one of the top NFL kickers once he's out. Like I haven't seen a kicker be as confident and playing as well as he is at this point. It's like it's unreal.
Yeah.
But that piece, I just have too much confidence in 2/3 the team, and then what Leicester has shown from a progression standpoint, where you had.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I think you do it.
I feel like truthfully, I feel confident about majority of the rooms. Like O-line, I feel better about with Phillips coming at receiver. I feel a lot better about that room. You can have a better team. You can have 2 really good coordinators. You can have a good special teams, good head coach, good idea of how to run a program. But with this schedule,
it's 6.5 wins for a reason.
Like it's gonna I could see 7 wins because the schedule is so difficult. You could play, you could lose to Penn State and Oregon just by showing up and them just being. I mean, Oregon's offensive line and defensive line, like how
that will be a 30-point game.
Yeah,
could be a 30.
Could be a third point game.
Yeah.
Like Ferguson at tight end, like that dude's. Yeah. That's what Oregon just has. It's just like a Kelsey at tight end.
And then the receiver talents.
Yeah, Tez Johnson's the best receiver other than whatever. So the schedule is so good. I don't disagree with this take that you could just have a good team and just not win. Yeah. You win 7 games.
You're essentially now in like the SEC.
Yeah,
like peak SEC.
We're playing rivalry games that teams want to beat your ass. Like at Nebraska
and at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It's going to be a nightmare of a season, but it's also setting up for like. If you could flip it on its head, then it becomes potential for the best season you can dream up.
100%. Braden Vassey, we beat 2 of the 3 playoff teams in 2024, IU, Penn State, or Oregon at home.
I think we'll beat IU at home. I think that's going to be that typical early Kinnick crowd that just shows up belligerently drunk. And there's just not a lot of teams that like surmount that in their first opportunity to do it. None of those guys have stepped in the Kinnick. They don't realize what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So then you had that first quarter and a half where we saw, Penix and that crew come in and just completely flounder.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's
it's Washington this year
the
too.
last thing you want to do is come into Kinnick with expectations for your team and not be uber talented.
Not be a top 5 talented team.
So
or
if you're
top
going to
10
come
talented
in
team.
with top 10 ranking, top 15 ranking, put that ranking on your name. That means it's a sellout. That means the crowd's excited. That means the crowd's having a fun tailgate.
A lot of the blue hairs are selling their tickets because it's
They're making their money.
yeah.
The crazies show up, and all of a sudden you're in this like unranked environment at Iowa where you're supposed to be favored maybe by 2 or maybe like it's a close line, and you're just in this dungeon, and you're like, where the hell are we? Like,
Yeah.
I think the Indiana game's for sure an upset opportunity. It's nice that when we get Penn State and Oregon, if you get those as road games, those are 20-point games this year because Katron Allen being back, Singleton being back, Oregon's obviously bringing in a top 3 recruiting class every year, portal-wise and recruiting-wise. The line of scrimmage of those teams is what really screws us because they're just going to dominate those sides of the ball. But night game possibly, hopefully not big noon Saturday. Getting these teams at home.
You need night game for Penn State. Oregon, I've already punted on. I think that those
it's a
teams,
really tough game.
and the only reason I have any hope for Penn State
Is Aller.
is Aller.
Yeah.
Because you've seen him flounder in big moments. He's not a runner, so it helps our scheme against him. Their defense is just so like they're just going to smother us.
Yeah, but what I like is they lose Warren.
Yeah,
that's my number one
That's
thing.
their offense could struggle.
I
That's
think-
where we could get into that low scoring.
But still Coltonecki.
They just won't have that. Like Warren being gone, the receiver talent's just not to the level where we're going to be chasing the whole game.
Yeah.
But they could just come out and run the ball. But they've struggled to run the ball in us for years. They're not a consistent running the ball team.
They're not dominant over that situation.
But that I feel decent about that game. Oregon, but it's Dante Moore. Obviously super highly talented recruit, but he's going to step into his first gigantic game there. You could get some early game nerves.
Yeah. I agree with the point though. I think I predict us to win that game.
Yeah.
Just the scope of it and getting 2 playoff teams at home. Penn State's definitely the better option. I think Oregon's just going to reload with that Nike money, and that's just hard to overcome. But you just spook Aller without Warren, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Nicholas Robertson, we have 3 Big Ten all-conference skill position players: quarterback, receiver, running back. I kind of agree with it because you could go Moulton at like second team, Gronowski
at
third team, Phillips third team, right?
Yeah, it's like what then? It's a 60 catch year for Phillips. Then that's probably what you got to be at
Or a lot of touchdowns. Yeah,
Because think about USC, Washington,
yeah.
Oregon.
It's going to take a
those
lot to get a
teams chuck.
receiver.
Yeah, receiver is just very difficult. But if you're the best receiver of the team, and like theoretically, he could be our number 1 target like every single game
Mhm.
by get double targets anyone else is getting. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think that
with the scope of the Big Ten.
with the scope of the Big Ten, how Iowa's going to play offense too, we're just not going to get him enough touches.
Yeah, I do agree with if Gronowski wins 10 games and plays a really efficient style, definitely has an opportunity to just get on all Big Ten because you're the winning quarterback. Beathard was second team because he won 12 games.
And who knows? You might see Ostrenga have a huge year too.
That's what my point was going to be about tight end. FOL Hawkeye is 1 receiver has over 600 yards. Maybe 2 other receivers have over 400 yards. I could see that. Phillips as your 600 guy, RVZ, and maybe Gill as your 400 yards.
It's too many yards.
You think a tight end would be the other guy?
And running back.
Yeah.
And just we won't throw for more than 2,100 yards next year. Or we'll throw for like 2,400 probably.
Yeah, 2,400. Yeah.
So then you got to,
space it out. Yeah. And there's probably the room is just too deep too, right?
yeah.
Like, you're just gonna-
Howard's been playing, Bowie's been playing.
Yeah, RVZ and
Yeah.
Gilby splitting reps.
None of the guys are just so much different than the other ones that they're not going to give the other ones like everyone's going to get an opportunity.
Yeah. I think you'd still see Phillips over like 400 or,
I can see Phillips having like a 600, 700 yard year.
Yeah.
For sure. But other than that, the other guys, like what Gill ended this year with is our top target for 375, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's not
and
gonna be
he got the ball a lot.
Yeah. Debo Samuel hate page. I always say Debo when I read his tweets. So I don't know if you want that to have occur, but that's how I end up reading them. He's got a great one. One of the current freshman LBs is named the starter over Harrell
So it'd be Weiskopf
or Buffington.
Or Buffington.
I think
I could see Buffington. Now that we got the numbers in that he ran a 4.5 at Iowa's camp, because when we projected him out, we're like, well, he looks a little stiff. Like that was our only knock on him. We from a physicality standpoint and like putting his face through guys, we're like, this guy's
I rewatched it again though. He doesn't look that stiff.
Yeah.
I think it
It's
was
more
like,
of just like we're downgrading a small town kid.
yeah. I think, and when they came out with the numbers at 4.5, like 40,
Mhm.
like if Keeter doesn't come back and play middle linebacker, I would want Shire at middle linebacker and Buffington at weak.
Or I would go. I think
Buffington
you
middle.
reverse it. Because Buffington's just that middle linebacker mentality. Where it's
Yeah, I just
like,
want my senior calling out everything,
true.
sending all the calls, and I just like the idea of Buffington just like having flat run throughs.
I could see Weiskopf. I think wasn't Weiskopf playing Leo though.
That makes sense. I think he's like that safety.
I really want to see
linebacker.
him play weak side though. I think he'd fit really well into that weak side role as well.
Yeah.
But I agree that.
I don't see Harrell winning the job.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah.
And Buffington just feels like that prototypical dude, like mentality wise.
Yeah.
Just get him out there.
Dude thumps.
Let him knock skulls.
Yeah. Epineza leads the team in sacks and pressures. Connor just gave
I
your
didn't
entire
read
point.
that prior to the episode.
Yeah, that's from Kirby Hawk 69.
Sounds like a genius. Pressures and sacks.
Yeah.
I don't see why not. Llewellyn's probably your obvious choice, but like Herkett's not a sack guy. He had a good year from a pressures perspective, but he's not your he's not going to be playing a lot of third downs. I don't think out wide,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have other options because you're going to want to give him days off to play.
I would say Llewellyn.
Llewellyn's like your obvious choice, but
Yeah.
there's potential there.
Yeah.
I really do think.
Gun in my head, it's Llewellyn. I
Yeah.
think you obviously bigger at Epineza than I am. Like
I think
that
he's just
room
going to
is-
step like again the size. It's like you're the biggest DN on the team.
Flint Ironstag, despite a difficult schedule, Iowa will only barely miss the CFP. That's probably what 10-2 with an upset then, right?
Yeah, you beat Penn State at home, but then you lose at Nebraska, or
Yeah.
you lose at that'd be better than Wisconsin or Rutgers.
I think the scary
You lose
part,
at USC, lose at USC, and you lose to Oregon, and you miss it.
I think Iowa's gonna have a really hard time making the CFP. That's what this year's showed me. Because even if we go 10-2, we don't lose to UCLA and we don't lose to Michigan State. We only lose to Ohio State
And Iowa State.
and Iowa State. We still miss it.
Mhm.
And that was like a pretty difficult schedule. You kind of have to go 11-1 unless you win your conference.
But even 11-1, Iowa State, you would have solved it because Iowa State would have been like a top 25 win. But like you wouldn't have had a big win.
Yeah, but there just isn't enough 11-1 teams. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, you probably would have bumped SMU, right?
Yeah, you would have bumped them. So it'd been one of the situations where I think that's where Iowa sits, though. It's like either go 11-1 or win the conference is the only confident way to make it in because you even heard this year, Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina even were getting talk about the playoff at 9-3. And like you're talking about Iowa next to those SEC programs,
Yeah.
like how much like more ESPN is going to be pushing for them to be in the playoff. They're going to find any chink in our armor. Oh, you're like you have a win against Michigan State. That was a 4-point win in the last drive. Like they shouldn't be in. The metrics say they shouldn't be in. Like they're going to find ways not to get us in there.
Yeah.
So I think it's really difficult for us to make the playoff if we don't win the conference.
It's going to be 11-1 seasons.
Yeah.
That'll be the way in.
This is Scott. Iowa will have a Doak Walker finalist. Like it's definitely Moulton.
I don't think we'll have a finalist this year.
Yeah.
I think Moulton maybe as a senior, but he's really special. But like you see even Caleb Johnson, like he didn't win the Doak this year and had the best year in Iowa football history, arguably.
Yeah.
And like granted the finalists, like apples to oranges, but he just doesn't have when he gets to the second level, the untouchable aspect that Caleb did. Where
Yeah.
he's, running at you at 220 and that safety sits down because he thinks he's going to get ran over and then he runs around you.
Yeah.
Like that's where he's just a super special player. I don't think he's at that level yet. I also think he's going to get spelled a fair amount too.
Yeah, this is a similar comment too from the other receivers' standpoint. The Iowan Stallion says Gill and Phillips combined for 1,000 receiver yards.
Yeah, I think that they hit that because those would be the top two guys.
Yeah, and then Bailey Schmidt, Iowa QB throws 20+ touchdowns.
No.
It depends if you.
2 touchdowns. I mean, that's like what 1.75 touchdowns a game.
Yeah, that's not happening.
That's not happening.
If you
Because
maybe
we
count rushing.
just the way not being explosive. How you get a lot of passing touchdowns is through explosive plays from 30 and 40 yards out. If you're going to be inside the 10, likely not going to have the receivers to be a heavy fade team this year,
Mhm.
or have the talent to get those guys the ball.
Yeah,
Lester seems pretty dead set too on running QBs, shuttle passes, sweeps, all that kind of stuff.
show pass to the touchdown pass.
It is, I guess. I just don't see a 20.
Yeah.
I see like 18. That's your high water mark. And that's a good season for what we're trying to do.
Yeah. The Nick Bear, Trevor Lauk is Iowa's highest graded O lineman. If he plays right guard.
He could play right guard. Yeah. But Dunker was a top
10.
Top 6 tackle
Yeah.
this year. So he's going to be a top, 5 tackle. And there's no way that Lauk upsets him. But like, I don't want to downplay Lauk because obviously big time recruit. Why we didn't rank him higher when we did our recruiting ranking of his class is we just liked a couple O linemen better for our system. He didn't. Traditionally, those guys who have a lot of weight on them early in high school don't transition well to tackle for us.
Mm-hmm.
Like Richmond was at 260 when he was playing in high school. Dunker was at like 250, 260.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, that's a build him up position. Keep the bendy, flexible athletes out wide. Stevens is more of your Stevens is more of who you see then move on the interior. And that's actually more of a recent development as well, too, is where we go to these larger guards who can push guys out of gaps.
Yeah.
But I could see Lauk being a very effective guard. Like he's got a good shove to him. He's got enough size to him. But I just don't see the athleticism enough to, break through easily this year. We're a for sure starter.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're missing something with him. Obviously, he's ascended relatively fast.
Yeah.
But that might just be a product of literally not having a tackle out there.
Yeah.
Like there's 4 tackles and he's the 4th one.
Yeah.
Or at least for last year.
Yeah, it could be injuries, could be, plenty of things.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen plenty of guys pop up on the 2 deep, that has
Ellsbury was in the 2 deep as a freshman.
Yeah.
Never, started the season.
I think even Volk, going back
Volk,
to guy
Volk
was like a backup guard for like 3 years and then all of a sudden transferred to UNI.
Yeah.
It's like it's like there's guys in the Army. Kirk always says like, we got 8 guys in the Army. And like then there's 10 guys on the depth chart.
Yeah.
And so I don't know about if Lauk is one of the Army guys or if he's in the, he practices left tackle and
technically he is, the backup left tackle.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. We'll be pausing our Patreon subscriptions right now until we fire back up full time in season 3. So thank you for all of our patrons that have contributed to the channel. We really appreciate it. We've really enjoyed this season. I think it's a year that came with a lot of expectations, and then we kind of had obviously like instantly a horrible loss that just reset the team and reset like how we view about Iowa. And then it's weird watching Ohio State win a national title as well. Essentially we played 11 a.m. at the national title winning team and had them at 7-0 at half. Like that's not nothing.
No,
like you played a team that
you did have some breaks in there. You obviously had the fumble by Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, but you also kind of messed up in your first few drives too. Like you could have made.
You had potential there to stay in the game.
You could have stayed
far
in the game.
better than a lot of the teams that played in the playoff.
Right. And like Jeremiah Smith ended up making you look dumb. Like you made everyone look dumb this year.
Yeah.
And I think that's truthfully what it came down to. You had. I'm not going to count Northwestern as a like opponent this year. That just Lausch at QB was a joke, and we should never have lost that team. So you had that game doesn't matter. 2 non-cons don't matter. And Ohio State, 11 a.m. at Ohio State, national title winning team. Like that's not a like opponent in my eyes.
You had 8 like opponents if you knocked out.
We had 9
like opponents with Missouri.
Lost 4 of them.
Lost 4 of them.
Yeah, 9. So if you look at the entire scope of the season, you truly only played 9 like opponents this year. And you went 5-4 in those games. And truthfully, you had the opportunity to win all 9. Even at Michigan State, if we don't blow a few third downs early in that game, we had I was watching a game last night, 3rd and 2, down by 6, and we just run it into their teeth on a quick action count. We get a pick from Entringer, incredible play by him.
Mm-hmm.
He passes off a vertical route and then sniffs it in route.
It's the Dane Belton special.
Incredible play.
Yeah.
And we go 3 and out. And it was 6-0 at the time, both those times. If we score, go up 7-6 in that game, the energy flips. You're not playing this like, holy crap, why are we getting our ass kicked game? And I still think and obviously you still had, double-digit leads against Missouri, Iowa State, and UCLA. So 4 of your losses against like opponents, you could have won all 4. And you had dominant performances in the other 5 as well. So it's like, other than Nebraska, you had a good year. You could have had a great year. And the program is in a good spot, but it's also in a spot where it's never had to play this type of schedule. And I think that's where you sit.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I take away from the season is just how well the offense developed as the season went on.
Mm-hmm.
You think about Missouri game, we already mentioned it, but outside of a couple drop passes, that was almost a wire-to-wire performance by the offense, where it was well-designed. We were playing the style of football we wanted to, where we were constantly in 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3. and then very comfortable in those positions where we had, multiple looks. Unless they're really just, you could tell the playbook was finally kind of fully fleshing its way out, where now these guys have been playing in the system for a long time and you have multiple ways to attack them. And it just looks really complete. And I think if you just put a review on Leicester's year, you think about what we were able to accomplish without a passing attack. You were able to have the top rushing offense in the Big Ten, and you weren't able to, back teams up. You had, a lot of 8 and 9 man boxes with aggressive man-to-man and teams playing fast, and you were still able to go out and execute a run game. That's a large product of inheriting experienced line. But I think what I saw from a schematic standpoint is he was able to simplify looks, play more college football where he's able to utilize the middle of the field, and then also mix in these, really intelligent deep shots where you had, the Ostrenga wheel route against Missouri where he's completely naked. You had the Gill getting over the top on UCLA. He had these opportunities where it felt like you really flipped it on its head and you used aggression effectively. And also when you were trying to stay on schedule, it looked comfortable as well, even against aggressive sets. And I think that's just a really good sign for this team that we have an effective coordinator who understands what he wants to do. And it just seems like a creative, likable dude. And I think that's going to really progress. You project out Leicester's career here as long as you can hold on to the kid. And I think he's going to make a pretty good case for being the head coach one day just because of the front man personality he has and being an ex-QB and being a good, tall, good-looking guy. I think you kind of have to hitch your wagon to him. And if you can start having him get in these QBs and receivers years where he can have, maybe Phillips and Gronowski have a top half QB receiver year, and then you can go out and recruit guys.
I think Cash Herrera, there were some clips that came out a few weeks back. I think
they might have nailed one.
I think he found his guy.
Yeah.
Now, the lower body's not there yet in terms of movement. Kid can spin it though. And that'd be awesome. If you're QB, you're your head coach, your OC, that can be your head coach in waiting. You can recruit QBs
and spot them,
and they're like NFL. That's kind of the future of this program where it needs to take. It's like pro style NFL development of QBs, and that's like where I said.
Yeah, but then you view the opposite side of the ball. It's like D-line recruiting has been incredible. Like we had a little bit of a null year here where our D-line, we didn't have the depth we wanted. But you think about this class we just brought in with Chinecki, Anderson, all those guys. 4 really big studs. And then also Eozi walking in. And the class prior, you had Merriweather.
Yeah.
Once those guys grew up and maybe your D-line steps back into being the dominant force it is, where you're a top 3 D-line, maybe even a top 1 or 2 in the conference outside of, obviously Ohio State, Penn State. Linebacker rooms are completely full. Safeties looks great. Corners, we talked about the issues there, but you have to trust Phil in the long run to develop these guys, potentially bring in transfers. Special teams is in a beautiful spot too.
Yeah.
Like you're really starting to see the picture of Iowa football where it's not going to be with this new NIL and the collection of talent that occurs at these top 6 teams. You haven't really, but that's been forever in college football.
Yeah.
The top 6 teams are light years ahead of where other teams are at, and they go out and blow teams out. Fucking TCU and Washington get to championship games and lose by 40 and 50. It's like that's just a reality of this game.
Yeah.
But what we want is Midwestern dominance. And you're really starting to put together a picture where you have an offensive offering that is sustainable and you're not feeling like you're cratering. You're not losing your best players to the transfer portal. You have a chance to finally develop with this OC. I think the picture's looking at least better than it would have under Brian Ferentz tenure and then Kirk sailing off to the sunset. I think there's like a 5 to 10 year track here where you at least see some positivity.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's you got the coordinators in place you want. You feel good about both of them. Phil needs to make some adjustments around, developing certain positions. But I think 2025 is just what I was going to be going the next 10 years. Tough schedule, good team. You have good special teams. Feel good about offense, feel good about defense and aspects. They all have their own individual holes. And you got to win against good programs that are going to be recruiting to the same level you are. And there's going to be 7 games a year where you might have a little bit lesser talent too in a lot of spots.
So it's going to come to bounces. It's going to come to down to technique,
penalties, turnovers, things that Kirk usually does well, special teams.
Yep.
So how do you separate yourselves? If you have those 3 aspects to your team, yeah, that might be better in 2 or 3 spots. Got to win your home games. And then you got to make some plays on the road by creating turnovers.
I think just the key is the defense needs to return to its old form.
Yeah. I don't know if they ever will.
I think you just had a bit of a hole on the D-line. I think that was Like
Yeah.
you had a string of DNs
and
get
corner,
drafted
yeah.
and string of
CB2,
corners get
yeah.
drafted. That needs to return.
Yeah. Thank you for a great year. We've enjoyed the finish of our second season. We really, we'll be chomping at the bit to break down recruiting, personnel, and the schedule, and doing all of our predictions going into next year. I'll probably fire up early summer, so look for us to return and enjoy, hopefully, a basketball team that can climb back into tournament contention. It's been a rough week. We follow that closely as well, unfortunately. And in the meantime, we'll be tweeting about Iowa basketball, talking about incoming recruits, talking about anything in Iowa sports on our Twitter page at the ANF Podcast. Come follow us, and we'll be engaging with you guys there. But thanks again. We really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed and you're this late in the podcast, please subscribe. Please comment. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.